Sarah Levitt, born Macclesfield, Cheshire, 1956.
Karen Chouhan, born Lahore, Pakistan, 1957.
English atheist parents from Cheshire, Lancashire and Yorkshire families. Factory workers, a shoemaker, a collier, tenant farmer, station master, a publican and Huddersfield Corporation's transport manager.
Indian Christian parents, a mixed background from France, Portugal, Holland and Germany. We were Indian before partition, Pakistani after partition.
My dad worked in the Workers' Educational Association and then Keele University. My mum was a teacher and social activist.
After the horrors of partition, my mum and dad moved to England. My mum was a secretary for the National Union of Teachers, and my dad, from having a job in Pakistan Royal Air Force in Pakistan, then decided to have his own business doing deliveries.
The horrors of the Second World War and its aftermath drove my parents' commitment to social change. A job which became my father's post at Keele University prompted a move to Leek, Staffordshire, for my parents just after I was born. And this is some of us in North Wales.
I moved to Leicester to study philosophy, where I wanted some answers to the questions that I had about racism and discrimination in society, but instead I really only got more questions.
This is me skiing. My upbringing informed my commitment to social change, to academe and to heritage. Weeks into my first museum job, the riots that hit the country reached our elegant museum Georgian front door. I knew then that heritage must help everyone to feel they belong.
Racism at school pushed me into my lifelong work for equality and organising within the trade union movement.
I studied history of art at Manchester University, then history of dress at the Courtauld Institute in London. I then specialised in the history of ready-made clothing.
I did my master's in Bradford and met my lifelong soulmate, Jagdish, a Leicester lad. We live in Leicester, and Leicester calmed me. I love this world of diversity and amazing interconnections between people.
I came to Leicester in 1997 to head up the museum service. By then, my interest in cities had grown from my work in Bristol, Manchester and London. We need to feel that we belong and to enjoy where we live. We need to feel personally valued by the people we live with and to feel they value our own communities.
We are all global citizens. We're all very different, but as you can see from Sarah and myself, we are also very similar, different, but equal.
So we move now to tell something about the story of Leicester. In the 1950s, in Charnwood Forest, some boys found the famous Charnia fossils. These were the first complex life forms, and they lived underwater 560 million years ago. And they delighted David Attenborough when he was shown the Australian versions on a film shoot in Australia. Ice caps and dinosaurs followed, and the mighty rivers gave us our gravel and our fertile red earth round here. 6,000 years ago, our people first settled here. 2,000 years ago, Leicester was an important Roman city. It bustled with trade from across the empire and had villas decorated with mosaics, including this one. Peacocks came from India. They were naturalised by the Romans and they've been here ever since. Maybe people from Asia and Africa used our huge bathhouse. And then, of course, the Saxons and the Vikings came. 1,000 years ago, Leicester Castle was built by our French conquerors. The British legal system, perhaps inspired by the Islamic one, was born in places like this. 600 years ago, after the Black Death, Leicester's population was rapidly replenished by people from across the country, from Ireland and France, thanks to our wool trade. And then in 1485, Richard III's body lurched into Bow Bridge on the journey back from Bosworth, bringing peace after the long Wars of the Roses. In 1645, King Charles I's army attacked Leicester in one of the worst crimes of the English Civil War. The town committee met here in the Guildhall to plan their defence. Some were later hung and others were cut to pieces. The townfolk made their last stand at the High Cross before being mercilessly punished. Later, in 1688, guns were stored here in our gateway to protect the town amid the chaos of the Glorious Revolution, which brought Dutch monarchs to the throne. The regiment that used the guns, or maybe they didn't, became the Royal Leicestershire Regiment. Their emblem is a tiger over the word Hindustan, reflecting their time in India. In 1876, our town hall replaced the Guildhall. Its lovely fountain was the gift of Leicester's first Jewish mayor. Abbey Pumping Station, built in 1891, was opened to deal with our sewage. This was also an expression of civic pride, as you can see, as were our museums, libraries, parks and cemeteries, an art school, swimming pools, technical college, and a university college. Some of the world's best-known engineering, footwear, knitwear, elastic and outerwear firms flourished here in Leicester, making some of the modern era's most iconic products. Pick, for instance, pioneered the cardigan. Picks are now flats. We lived through 2 world wars and welcomed the Irish, the British, Eastern Europeans, African Caribbeans and Sikhs. And then in 1972, after our infamous advert telling people not to come, we welcomed Ugandan Asians. Our Asian community grew strong, and our Diwali celebrations the biggest outside India. Today, people from the world over are still making Leicester their home. I am told that French is our fastest growing language because of the French-speaking African communities. We do festivals. St George's Day was actually started in Leicester by one of our markets officers who is Asian. Dragons feature in Northern Europe and Eastern folk traditions. And this one obviously celebrates our patron saint from Asia Minor. New Walk Centre in the rubble. Today, the old Leicester is being replaced by a new Leicester, and factories are being replaced by flats. You can just see at the back left of this picture the roof of Richard Harris's warehouse behind the rubble. On his travels in South America, Alfred Russel Wallace saw a tape woven with Richard Harris, Leicester, decorating a hut in a forest. And he thought of his home in Leicester and the might of its industries that could reach out to these far-flung corners of the world. Now, don't look at the electricity box next to the statue of John Biggs. Like Harris, Biggs was a city father and a knitwear pioneer, and he stands outside that wonderful building, Welford Place, which was once their grand manufacturer's clubhouse, and it now sells pizzas to international students. And here's Curve. Things move on, and round here, the West African shoe shop is gone, and I'm told that 20% of the cultural quarter's resident population is Chinese. Today, Richard III is in our cathedral, and tourists have come from all over the world. We are still here, semper eadem. Some people, always the same, can trace their roots back here for hundreds of years, but probably most of them, like me and probably like you, can't. But we must always be one city and one community, proud of ourselves and living at peace with each other.
One city, one community. Is that so in Leicester? Do we all get along really well? Thank you so much for doing the citizenship test that as you came in, the 7 questions that we asked you. I have the results for you, and 96% of you that gave it back failed this test. So I would really like to ask the people that didn't pass, that's 90% of you, to pay another £50 to do the test again. And you can come back into the auditorium if you do that. I'm only joking. But the point is this. I mean, how many of you knew that the last one, number 7, the present perfect question? Anybody? Ah, you're all being shy. But that's the kind of question that is asked of people who are coming into the country now and who have to learn ESOL. Oh, gosh, can you move back a bit? It's moving on. Okay. So if you're anything like me, you'll think that those questions are just not relevant. How many times have you been asked about Boudica when you go for a job interview? How many times have you been asked how many members of the Security Council are there when you've been for a job interview? And if you have, I'm thinking about what kind of job you would have gone for on that one. It's not relevant. These are just keep moving on. Can I move them back? Okay. It's not equitable. We ask migrants and people that are coming to this country to jump higher hurdles than we have to jump. But guess what? It's easily fixable, because what we should do is just require everybody to do the citizenship test before they have access to services, before they have access to the health, to education, whatever it is. Wouldn't that be good? Yeah? Would we all pass? And if we don't pass, what would we do? And I think the first people that should take this test, to be slightly political, is people who say things against migrants. So they should be the ones that take the citizenship test. We should test them on what they know about equality laws in this country, and then they can have access to the services. And while we're about it, I think a lot of them could do with English tests, right? There's a hierarchy of citizenship. So just have a look at this quote and look at the first the fourth line in bold. David Goodhart, quite infamous, wrote that this is a country of stranger citizens, and we've got to share with them. What's a stranger citizen? You're either a citizen or not. There's not a hierarchy, but there is, because there are inequalities for lots of people who are labelled as migrants and not as white British citizens. So it's really important that if we get citizenship, that we are treated equally. You know, poverty in this country, about 2/5 of people from black and minority ethnic households live in poverty. That's twice the rate for white people. So even when you have citizenship, it doesn't mean we have equality. And I would really like us here today to start thinking about what citizenship means, especially for the people of Leicester. And I really don't like the last couple of lines, you know, that we should share a set of common values, but as Britain becomes more diverse, that common culture is being eroded. I don't agree. I think as Britain becomes more diverse, we are finding a common culture, and we are finding common values. What are values? For me, it's about respecting and loving my neighbour, making sure that we treat people with equality and dignity. Aren't those universal values? I don't know what British values are. I would hope they are those. So what we have is citizenship becoming part of quite a negative narrative around migrants. So all of these words, citizenship, cohesion, immigration, asylum, Islamophobia, division, difference, and discrimination, all of that amounts to a negative discourse around people coming in to the UK. And what I'd like to do is completely move away from that negative narrative. I want us to remember the contribution of people of colour. So if you look in sport, where would we be without Formula One champions, without all of our Olympic champions? How many medals would we have won without people from different countries in Britain? Where would we be without black and minority footballers? Where would we be without people in rugby and cricket and all the other sports? Where would we be without black music and all of these wonderful singers that are coming through, and culture and dance? You recognise all of them? Yeah, good, I'm just testing. Okay. Where would we be without all of the winners of talent shows? Yeah, I love talent shows. I love watching Britain's Got Talent or X Factor, because you do see the diversity coming through on those shows. Where would we be without fashion designers, radio presenters? This guy here is the first Rear Admiral in the British Navy. Comedians, cultural, winners of talent shows, and food. All of the Indian food. We all know that in Britain, the favourite British food is curry. A chicken tikka masala, to be precise. This is the favourite British food. Where would we be without that? Where would we be without our politicians and our activists? And there's Shami that's going to come on later. So we really need to reclaim the language. Where would we be without health workers, migrants in the health service, migrants in the transport systems? For a very small minority of people, we have done remarkably well in integrating throughout the UK. So don't believe it when you get that negative discourse about we need more integration. Actually, Britain has some of the best integration in the world. It may not be perfect, we may not all get along, but integration is better here than most places in the world. Let's celebrate that fact, celebrate the contributions, reclaim our language, challenge any C words like cohesion and citizenship, and change them to contribution and credit. Challenge any I words like integration, Islamophobia, institutional, immigration, and replace them with innovation and imagination. Debunk any D words and like division and discrimination, and change it to determination and drive. And we would like to say, join us in our campaign, and we want you to have and be a first-class citizen, immigrant and proud. Thank you very much.